Our message is very clear that they can run but they will not hide, and that they've taken an innocent soul.
You cannot express emotions except to ventilate. If you feel like crying, you must cry.
There's a mastermind behind this.
The police told us last week, even last month, that they've got the right suspect, but today they withdrawn the case. How come?
There were a lot of discrepancies, there were a lot of inconsistencies, there were a lot of contradictions in the evidence.
The first 5 suspects have been arrested between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. this morning in Gauteng and Newzroom.
There's always a drama taking place where the police can act as if they are doing something.
Long live South Africa and long live Senzo Meyiwa.
It has taken 8 years for the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial to get off the ground. The football superstar was gunned down at the home of his girlfriend, that's the singer, Kelly Khumalo. That was back in October of 2014. To be exact, 26th of October is that fateful day. Muziga ukhalelwa Sibiya, Bongani Ntanzi, Mthobisi Mncube, Mthokoziseni Mapisa and Sifiso Kuhle Ntanzi will be back at the High Court in Pretoria tomorrow to be tried for Meyiwa's murder. They are facing charges of murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, possession of an unlicensed firearm and the possession of ammunition. To unpack this further, we're joined by legal analyst Advocate Modidima Mannya, who joins us in studio here. Advocate, thank you so much for making the time. I know that it's a difficult trial. It's a difficult moment for the family of the Meyiwas. I want to start off this conversation by just asking you a simple question around the charges that the 5 accused face here. And as we've counted, key among them, premeditated murder, attempted murder, and you've got the possession of unlicensed firearms and the possession of ammunition. Do these charges, Advocate, tell us anything about the direction that this case is likely to take?
Yes, they do, because it tells you what the police investigation, at least, has found, and what the prosecutors have decided should be the charges that should be preferred. Whether in the final analysis the accused will be convicted is another issue. We are not there yet. We're not even anywhere where we can get a sense of whether there's a possibility of a conviction or not. But I suppose that the prosecutors are satisfied that they at least have a prima facie case that they can present to court.
Part of the reason I ask you this question around the charges, Advocate, because they are key in illuminating what we're likely to see unfold before the courts. And one of the most interesting charges for me is the premeditated murder charge. And I focus the attention there simply because Advocate Gerry Nel, who's keeping a watching brief on behalf of the Meyiwa family, holds the strong view that there is a mastermind behind Senzo Meyiwa's murder. So, if there's a mastermind, that tells us that we're likely to see more arrests, but how difficult is it going to be for the state to prove that indeed there is a mastermind?
Well, the state is not alleging a mastermind. Premeditated really says that these people had planned to do this, whether on their own or with somebody else. But I think one of the things that becomes complicated in this matter is when statements are made and there's actually no evidence to support it. I think if I was part of the family, I would feel a bit undone. When people keep on making these statements, I want closure. I want the real culprit, if there's such a thing, to be brought to book. At the same time, you know, we have, I think there are questions in the public domain about whether police did a good job. There are allegations of interference one way or the other. But what we can deal with is what is before the High Court in Pretoria. Then what is before the High Court in Pretoria is 5 accused, charged of those cases. whether in the fullness of time, the evidence that will be led will reveal something else, we can only talk about that when it happens.
You mention one critical element, and that is whether or not the state has the right people before court. We know the trials and tribulations that this country, and in particular the Meyiwa family, has gone through for us to finally see at least people before court who are accused of this particular murder. And this is a sore point, Advocate Mannya, because you have a man, his name is Zamogutle Mbata. If you've forgotten him, he's the first person that gets arrested by the police, and in no time, the case against him gets dropped. He's suing the state for wrongful arrest and defamation. His lawyer making it very clear over the last few years that his clients, that the life for his client will never be the same. And so I ask you the question, the people before court, the 5 accused, how do we know that they are the right people after so much bungling? By the way, we are going to talk about bungling in a moment.
Well, Collie, the police know why they arrested these people, but I think we must be very careful not to think that the system doesn't have its own faults. And quite often, police may act wrongly. And I think that where there are remedies, although money is not going to repair the damage that has been caused, is a very emotive issue. It involves a man who's loved by many soccer-loving people. So they will always probably associate him with that, even if he has been found not guilty. But whether the people before the court are the right people is a question that is related to the investigation. I think in one instance, my understanding is that the firearm charge has been the link to one of the accused. Unfortunately, me and you have not seen the contents of the dockets, so we wouldn't know whether there are even confessions or admissions made by any of the accused and what are the circumstances around that. But I think the bottom line in the matter is that I don't think Judge Maumela would allow people to appear before him when he thinks there are questions about even the integrity of their arrest. You know, it might be premature at this stage, but I think when that moment comes, he will step in as a judge to ensure that justice is done. So it's a bit of a difficult matter at this stage. We need to see the evidence as it unfolds in court. Of course, if they have been wrongly arrested, they would still have remedies. And I think with the qualification that the pain and humiliation will not go away even if they get 10 million each.
Advocate Mannya, you know, there's so much sensitivity around this case. And I say this in part to alert the viewers to the fact that you were not meant to be the only guest on this show. We had arranged so many people. Some of them had agreed, indeed, that they would be here, which is why we even put the boards that we usually do on the side of the screen. And one of the people that we had agreed with that he would be here is Shadrach Sibiya. His role at the time was head of the Hawks. He cancelled at the last minute to come to this show because he says he received a note from his lawyer to say, what are you doing? The sensitivities around this matter, Advocate, they cannot be overemphasized. Where am I going with this? I'm leading you here to answer me as to whether Chico Twala, that's the father to Longwe Twala, who was in the house on the day of Senzo Meyiwa's tragic murder. He said to me on the show that it would be strange to him if none of the people who were in that house on the day that this happened are not called to testify. Do you hold the same view?
Yes, certainly. They would have to come and testify. They are the eyewitnesses to what transpired. I think where there's an issue is whether they can identify or know who the actual perpetrator is. But I think for the state would be required to call at least any one or two of them to come and testify about the incident which occurred, which led to the death. So he's right to say it would be strange if none of them is called, because I don't know how the state will then prove that occurrence.
Yeah. And so for someone like Shadrach Sibiya to cancel at the last minute, and I'm not making an issue out of this, I'm simply trying to, I think, eliminate to the viewer's mind the importance of the people who were in the house on the night of the murder, including those who came to the crime scene, who were the first responders, if you like, because where the direction, or at least the questioning right now by the lawyers for these men that are accused of this crime, the direction of that case seems to be going the route that the police bungled here. There was a stage-managed crime scene. And so the importance here, Advocate, is whether people like Shadrach Sibiya, the former MEC of Community Safety in Gauteng, Sizakele Nkosi Malobane, along with others that were at the crime scene, how key are those people in the state, not only, I suppose, proving its case against the accused, but also rebutting the defense, because the defense at the moment is on the offensive that there was bungling. The crime scene was contaminated.
Yes, I think the issue of the contamination or otherwise of the crime scene is probably one of the elements which may not be decisive to whether the evidence will be admissible or not. Yeah. I think that's as far as it goes. But I think the issue with regard to Shadrach Sibiya and the former MEC goes far beyond that. There has been an allegation made that they were part of a scheme to try and prevent the real culprits being arrested. And if I was Shadrach Sibiya's lawyer, I would have advised him not to come here because I don't know whether he's ultimately going to be called to give evidence or whether the allegations against him are going to become a serious live issue. Yeah. But I must say, Tole, I think something that we need to talk about here is the fact that this matter is being contaminated itself by what we say without providing evidence. For instance, I think there's an expectation, and I think Dr. Twala went further to say, beyond just talking about whether people would be called, to say Senzo's friend was there in the house when this happened. And he would, if there was to be anything staged by the people in the house, he would find it difficult, and I would also find it difficult, that Senzo's closest friend would betray his friend in death and not tell the truth about what happened. In the same way, I'm not sure, because there seems to be an adverse public view about Kelly. Kelly is the mother to Senzo's child. Yes. And I have no doubt she would feel some pain, not only for herself, but for a child. And I think it is not unreasonable for people to expect that she would be able to tell. But the difficulty here is whether there is a mechanism to force any people who were in the house to say what we want to hear. Because I think what we want to hear is them saying it's one of us, or it's Tole who did it. Yeah. But they are saying we were the victims of a robbery. And I think this is where it's important for every one of us either to make statements which are supported by evidence, which enables that evidence to be tested, or to allow this process, imperfect as it is, to continue and be concluded, and we can do an assessment at the end of it. For instance, you recall that Kelly's lawyer was keeping a watching brief. There was an issue that she had to leave.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues was whether she was ultimately going to testify. So she would have prior insight of the evidence of other witnesses. So we are at a very early stage, and we are making such inflammatory statements. We are visually attacking each other. I think, for instance, I'm worried because it seems the family itself says the guys here are not the right guys.
Exactly.
But I think, in as much as I'm sympathetic to that, I would expect those who are making this to at least tell us what is it that they know that we don't have in terms of what is being said here. Because one of the dangers is I'm very reluctant to always think police will just go out and arrest the wrong person. They do often arrest wrong people. But I think with the nature of this matter and the investigations, I'm very reluctant to think that police would have just gone to make another blunder after the first one.
And I'm glad that you end this response on that note, because you would have noticed earlier I said we are going to talk about the bungling by the police, because there has been bungling. It is the reason why 8 years on, the case is only just starting. So we're going to talk about that bungling in a moment. Advocate Modidima Mannya is going to stay with us here, and we're also hoping to be joined by our reporter, Linda Mnisi. He has been following this case very closely. He is in Vosloorus. He's going to take us back. We're also going to be joined by Mama Joy, and you will know her as football's #1 supporter in this country. She's going to join us and talk to us about what the death of Senzo Meyiwa has done to the football fraternities. You're watching a special broadcast of the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, and that court case resumes tomorrow. And you will remember the events that led to the postponement, which we are going to refresh your mind about in a few moments. Let's take you to Vosloorus now, and that's where we find our reporter, Linda Mnisi. He is outside the home of Kelly Khumalo. Linda, good afternoon to you. Take us back to the court case that has been ongoing and the moment that led to its postponement. Perhaps it would be best to remind the viewers of just some of what the state's first witness has had to say, and that is Sergeant Thabo Mosia. What are some of the highlights and perhaps some of the issues that he has been tackled on by the defense lawyers? I'm not sure if Linda Mnisi is connected to us. Hopefully he will be able to hear us. Linda, if you can hear us, just key highlights of what has come out of the testimony of the state's first witness, that's Sergeant Thabo Mosia. All right, Linda Mnisi, I don't think we are quite connected to him just yet. We're going to see if we can have him connected as soon as we possibly can. In the meantime, let's try and continue the conversation with Advocate Modidima Mannya. He is sitting with me in studio, a legal expert. Advocate, I did earlier allude to the bungling by the police, and I don't think there's any argument there that there hasn't been bungling. Otherwise, 8 years down the line, we would have had someone sitting in jail for Senzo Meyiwa's murder. Just how much bungling has there been on the side of the police?
Well, let's characterize the bungling. I think we can accept that there was a bungling with the arrest of the guy that was subsequently released. But I wouldn't think it's a bungling to wait to get to 7 years. You know, the police and the good investigators are as good as the case. The case is as good as those who provide the information and evidence which enable the police to make a breakthrough. If just to give you an example of one of the latest sensitive matters in Bombela.
Yeah.
It seems like it took the police the shortest possible time to arrest because of the information and the support they got from the community. The police would have not been there when this murder was committed. They depend on the people who were there. And the police can only analyze as much as they are given. For instance, you can argue that the crime scene was contaminated.
Yeah.
But you can't exclude the possibility that it was contaminated before the first police officer arrived. You know, so it's going to take the police to get our support with information and other things to be able to make a breakthrough. This is why there are a number of crimes, as we speak now, who the police can't crack because they can only do so much.
Yeah.
So I don't want to think that the 8-year investigation or the delay up to so far constitute a bungling.
Yeah.
I do understand and appreciate these various theories that there's a mastermind, that there was a plot to prevent the investigation from continuing or the right people being arrested. But I'm saying it would make more sense if those saying those things put alternative information on the table.
You know, you make a very interesting point here, Advocate, because what is a niggling question in the public's mind about this case, and it's a name that you've mentioned a little earlier, about what benefit would there be for Kelly Khumalo to have the father of her child taken out? For what reason? But, you know, those will be left to the courts to prove or disprove. Is it possible right now at this early stage to even surmise why the public is so fixated on Kelly Khumalo? What is it about her that makes the public so desperately want her to be either arrested in relation to this case or, in fact, be questioned, which is what you said earlier, that the people who were in that house, it is in the normal course of action of investigating a crime, those that were around the person who would have died are probably the first to be questioned.
Yes, and I have no doubt the police question them. But whether the police can force them, and that's the point I was making, can we force anyone to say what we think we want to hear? Because I think there's something the public wants to hear. And there are people they want to hear it from. And the public seems to be saying, but these people are not coming to the party. But I'm also saying the other side is the version that they put. The version that they put is that there was an armed robbery, and this murder occurred within the context of that armed robbery. Now, this is where the complexity lies. Firstly, whether whatever these people have given information to the police on, it's clear that the police have formed a view that they cannot treat them as suspect and arrest them. Because you must bear in mind, Kole, all the time, we're a constitutional democracy. We're not going to say by suggestion in the window, Kole is guilty of something.
Yeah.
There has to be evidence. And I think that's the first difficulty. The second difficulty is, I think we're a difficult nation. We can really form a very strong adverse view. And I think this has formed around Kelly in particular to say, but she knows something.
What about Longwe Twala, for example? I'm sorry to cut in there, Advocate. What about Longwe Twala? He was also inside the house, including his girlfriend, who also happens to be the sister to Kelly Khumalo. Why is there fixation around Kelly Khumalo?
Well, that's the point I was making, and I was saying that, you know, it is something, I think it would make a big difference if people were suggesting that Kelly engineered the killing. But that's not what I understand people to be saying. People are saying you're actually covering up. But remember, this narrative goes with what is the suggestion that there was somebody inside the house. But I think, in all fairness, one of the people in the house would have cracked by now. And if there was a different version to what we are told.
Yeah.
Because, you see, there's so much you can do to protect a lie. But at the same time, there is so much that you can do to present a lie. So I don't necessarily think that I expect somebody to say what didn't happen.
Yeah.
At the same time, I expect people to say what has happened. Where I have a difficulty is whether I can force anybody to tell me what I think happened.
Advocate Modidima Mannya, you have been helpful in trying to understand the legalese around this matter and giving it to us in a very simple language. Hopefully, you are going to be one of the people that we tap into, whose wisdom we tap into as this trial gets underway. It's going to be a long road. It's been 8 years to get us where we are. Let's hopefully see this trial to its resolution once it does start.